Om Stapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupini avatara varishtaya Ramakrishnaya te namah Sruti smriti purananam alayam karunalayam namami bhagavad padam Shankaram loka Shankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra bhasha krudo vande bhagavanto punah punah. So we are continuing our discussion on this Ishadya Adhikaranam. This Adhikarana has got 7 sutras from 5th to 11th, including 11th sutra. So this particular Adhikarana deals with the arguments of the Sankhyas. And the Sankhyas argue that all the Vedantic statements can also be interpreted to establish that the pradhanam or prakriti of the Sankhya is the Jagat Karanam. So frequently I will prefer to use the Sanskrit equivalents instead of translating these technical terms into modern English language. That there will be some inadequacies, if you translate Sarvajñatvam as omniscience and Sarva Shaktimatvam as omnipotence, Sarva Vyapitvam as omnipresence. There are some theological problems because many of these terms are used in Christian theology and in Western philosophical systems with slightly different connotations. So I would prefer to use, as far as possible, the Sanskrit terms without translating them into English. Now coming to the subject. So as I mentioned, in the Ishadya Adhikaranam, which has got 7 sutras, are designed to refute the Sankhya's view that the Jagat Karanam, the original cause of this world, is Pradhanam or Prakriti. Now, its most well-known statement is found not in the Ishadya Adhikaranam, but in another Adhikaranam. It is technically called Sarva Vyakhyana Adhikaranam. That is in the first Adhyaya, 4th Pada. So 28th Sutra, it seems. So I shall try to refer to that because that should be studied first to understand the dynamics of the Sankhyas arguments. So this particular sutra is this: Etena sarve vyakhyata vyakhyataha. Vyakhyata is stated twice in this sutra to indicate that this particular prakaranam discussion ends here. So that is sutra, 28th sutra, Etena sarve vyakhyata vyakhyataha. So we are not going to discuss the sutra completely, but we are going to deal with that particular aspect of the sutra, Bhashyam, which is to be studied at the very beginning of each Adhikaranam. So I didn't want to confuse you, that's why I didn't want to hop from one sutra to another sutra, one pada to another pada. So the Bhashya is very simple. In this Bhashya, Bhashyakara gives a very important reason as to why he took up the refutation of the Jagat Karanavada of the Sankhyas instead of other systems of philosophy. In the Brahma Sutras, you find the Bhashyakara refutes the Nayayikas and Vaisheshikas and the Bauddhas, even among them especially the Shunyavadins and Vijnanavadins, that is Nagarjuna school and also Asanga Vasubandhu school, Yogachara system. And also, of course, he deals elaborately with the Purvamimamsa system also. But he considers Sankhyas as the most important, the most powerful opponent to Advaita. And there he uses the word Ataka Pradhana Malla Nibarhana Nyayena Adi Dishati. So Pradhana Malla Nibarhana means the maximum of destroying or defeating the chief antagonist, the champion of the opposite army. Suppose you are fighting, you are the captain of an army fighting with the enemies. In ancient times, there used to be duels, one-to-one fight, duels between the champions of different groups. So the most powerful warrior, the champion of the enemy group, of the enemies, will be chosen to fight with you. And if you could destroy him, then that means you have destroyed, is as good as having destroyed the opposite party, the enemy. So that is the argument. That's the reason why he chose Sankhya's as his first opponent at the beginning. That's the beginning of the dialectics in the Sutra Bhashya, that is the fifth Adhikarana. So, Ikshatehi na ashabdam ityarabhya pradhana karanavadaha sutraihi eva puna ashanka nirakritaka tasyahi pakshasya upodbalagani kanichit lingabhasani vedanteshu apadena mandamadin pradibhanti iti. What he says is, Ikshatehi na ashabdam. That is part of the Ishadya Adhikaranam. This particular statement is there. Now, in this statement, Sankhya's Sankhya's argument that Pradhanam or Prakriti is the Jagat Karanam, that is being refuted. Sutraihi eva puna ashanka nirakritaka tasyahi pakshasya vodbalagani kanichit lingabhasani vedanteshu apadena mandavadin pradibhanti. Now remember, the problem is there are many statements in Vedanta Vakyas which may appear to support the Sankhya view. That is the main reason. So they are very similar to Vedanta. I shall give you an outline, then we come to Bhashya. The reason is this. Sankhya's argue the Pradhanam or Prakriti, which is Jada, is the source of Jagat Karanam, is the original cause of the Jagat. The entire world, Mahatutvam, Ahangaram, then different other evolutes of Ahangaras. Rajasiga Ahangara is the cause of, these Tanmatras and Panchamahabhudas. Sattviga Ahangara is the cause of mind and Jnanendriyas, Karmendriyas. So in other words, the entire phenomenal world is constituted by the evolutes of Prakriti or Pradhanam, which is Jada. Now, the problem is, this Jada cannot be the cause of evolution. And they also argue that this Jada, Prakriti or Pradhana is Sarvajna and Sarvashaktiman. Now, how can this Jada Pradhana, how can it be Sarvajnam and Sarvashaktiman? That you remember, in the early Sutra Bhashya, in the Janmadeshyataka, etc., Bhashyakara established that Ishvara, which is Sarvajna and Sarvashaktiman, is the creator, is the Jagat Karanam. That is already established in the Chadasutri Bhashya context by Bhashyakara. So that should be kept in mind. So that subject is extended to Ishadya Adhikaranam. In the Chadasutri, Janmadhisyataka, Shastra Yonitvad, etc., Bhashyakara establishes the Sarvajna, Sarvashaktiman, Ishvara is Jagat Karanam, because it's Sarvajna and Sarvashaktiman, early established there for different reasons. If you want, I can explain further, but there is no need right now. So that topic is now repeated in Ishadya Adhikaranam. Now, Sankhyas argue, as we already seen in the previous sessions, that all the Vedanta Vakyas can be interpreted in the direction of establishing Pradhanam as Jagat Karanam. So, Advaitin's argument is that something that is Jada or which is not conscient cannot be Sarvajna or Sarvashaktiman. The Sankhya's view is, because this Jada, Pradhana, Prakriti in Samyavastha, that means Srishtehe Prag, Deva Saumya Agre Asit, Sadeva Saumya Agre Asit. Agre means Srishtehi Prak. In the Samya Avastha, when Sattva-guna, Rajo-guna, Tamo-guna are in equilibrium, at that time, all the three gunas are there. So, this Sattva-guna is the cause of Sarvajñatvam. Sattva Sanjayade Jnanam. So, Bhashyakara quotes earlier during the arguments coming from Sankhyas. And the Sankhyas take the support of the yoga system of philosophy, where it is stated that a yogi, because of, say, the Sattva-utkarsha, abundance of Sattva-guna, he becomes Sarvajña. In other words, Sattva-guna is the source and the cause of Sarvajñanam, Sarvajñatvam. This is the Sankhya argument, and they, of course, take support from yoga philosophy. Bhashyakara says it cannot be possible because in the Samyavastha there is Rajoguna, Tamoguna also along with Sattva-guna. If Sattva-guna produces Jnanam, then Rajoguna and Tamoguna produce obstacles to the Jnanam. So Sarvajñatvam becomes Kinchijñatvam. So these are two different terms. Means you cannot be a Sarvajña if you also contain Rajoguna and Tamoguna, because if Sattva-guna produces Jnanam, Rajoguna and Tamoguna will retard, will reduce, will decrease the Jnanam. So Sarvajñatvam is impossible through Sattva-guna alone. This is the argument. Therefore, Sattva-guna alone cannot produce Sarvajñatvam. Now coming to subject, please, later you can read this Bhashya. When you listen to it, you understand this particular sutra, 28 sutra, Sarva Vyakhyana Adhikaranam, Etena Sarve Vyakhyada Vyakhyataha. This is sutra. Now, such a Karya Karana Ananyatva Abhivagamat Pratyasanno Vedanta Vakyasya. That's the main problem. Karya Karana Ananyatva. Karya Karana Ananyatva means Satkaryavada, where the argument is that Karya, the effect, pre-exists in Karana. And now that is common for both Vedantins and also Sankhyas. So Sankhyas can, in many ways, Sankhyas can resemble and create misunderstanding among readers and students of philosophy. Because Sankhyas argument, Vedanta argument, so if Sankhya's believe in Parinamavada of Satkaryavada, Vedantins, Advaitins believe in the Vivarta aspect of Satkaryavada. We will discuss the Satkaryavada after this. That's very important. I cannot, every time, so I cannot take the subject again. So we have to keep this in mind if you want to make use of this text. This records later, we can make use of these discussions, explanations of the Satkaryavada and Asatkaryavada, which we'll do later, very soon. So, Devala Prabhudivischa Kaischit Dharma Sutrakarehi Sugrandeshu Asidaka. And Devala Smriti is one of the Smritis. So, Bhashyakara says, in Devala, saints like Devala, who wrote the Devala Smriti, one of the well-known books in Dharma Shastra, he also agrees with this Sankhya view. Therefore, Manda means those who are not well qualified to understand the subtle difference, they may misunderstand. That's why Mandamadin Pradibhanti iti. Vedanteshu apadena Mandamadin Pradibhanti iti. Therefore, many people who without understanding Vedanta and reading Vedanta Vakyas, Upanishad Vakyas, may after all believe that Sankhya view is correct. Because all these Vedanta statements can be interpreted to support Sankhya view that Pradhanam is Jagat Karanam. And so he gives the reason. Tena tat padishedhe eva yetno ativa kritaka Na Anvadi Karanavada Pradishede. Therefore, Bhashyakara says, that's why I did not bother to refute the arguments of Nyaya Vaisheshikas, especially Vaisheshikas, who believe the atoms or anus are the Upadana Karana of this world. So I did not bother to refute them. Rather, I chose to refute the Pradhana Karanavada of the Sankhyas. So instead of arguing or refuting the views of Vaisheshikas and other schools of philosophy, I decided to select the Sankhya system as Pradhana Malla, because he is like a champion of the enemy army or the enemies. So if you can defeat the enemy, the most powerful warrior of the enemy camp, then it is as good as having defeated the entire enemy army, enemy's camp. That's the idea. That's why he says, Tevena, for that reason, Tat Pradishede eva yatno ativa krito na Anvadi Karanavada Pradishede. Means, na Anvadi Karanavada Pradishede yatna na kritaha. Means, Anvadi Karanavada Pradishede yatna na kritaha. Kintu Tat Pradishede eva ativa yatna kritaha. That is the Anvaya. So, I worked hard, I focused on refuting the arguments of the Sankhyas who constituted the Pradhana Malla. And I did not worry with small little fries like the Vaisheshikas. Vaisheshikas don't pose much of a danger. They will not threaten the arguments. They did not threaten the position of the Advaitis. Because Sankhya position is very similar to Advaita position. What Advaita does is simple. Sankhyas believe that Pradhanam of Prakriti, which is Jata, is the cause of the world. And Purusha is only a Sanidhya. Advaitin says, no. Purusha is like Ishvara. And Prakriti or Pradhana is like Maya. So Ishvara makes use of Maya, Prakriti, in the Gita Bhashyakara says. So Ishvara uses this Maya. Maya is the Prakriti Pradhanam of Sankhyas and created this world. So a small little twist is given by Advaitins. Advaitins accept Maya, Prakriti, Pradhana are the same. But they only say it is not the creator of this world. It is an instrument in the hands of Ishvara for creating this world. So Advaitins, what they did, they give a small little twist. They said, all right, the Pradhana Prakriti is fine. But Pradhana Prakriti is Jata. What is Jata cannot be Sarvajna. So you can find the examples given in the Bhashya, which I will going to explain. Purusha is like Agni. And Pradhana is like a piece of iron. So the Sankhyas argue, let us say, I'm giving an example. If you touch the iron, a very hot piece of iron, you'll burn your skin. Advaitins say it is not the ayapinda, the piece of iron that burns your skin. It is the fire, Agni, that is present in the ayapinda, in the iron piece that is burning. And what is this Agni? Agni is Ishvara. So, according to Sankhya system, when Prakriti Purusha Samyoga takes place, evolution begins, Srishti begins. Advaitins say this heat, Agni, is like our Ishvara. And this piece of iron is like our Maya Prakriti. By itself, it cannot do anything. It can create this world only when it becomes a tool in the hands of Purusha. So Purusha of Sankhyas becomes Ishvara of Advaitins, and Pradhana of Sankhyas become Maya of Advaitins. So this is a very simple process. So, and of course Sankhyas give different other arguments to prove their point that constitute the entire Ishadhyadhikaranam one after another. So now coming back to this, I'm still discussing this Etena Sarve Vyakhyada. That is the Sutra 28 of I think first Adhyaya and fourth Pada. So Bhashyakara says, Tesham abhivot velagam vaidikam kinjit ligam apadena mandamadin pratibhayaditi. What happens is, there are many lingas, many indicators indicating mantras and vakyas in the Vedanta, which can create confusion, which can create the wrong conviction in the, among Mandamadin, those who are not well evolved, and they may argue with this, they may agree with Sankhya's view. They may agree with Sankhya's view, where Pradhana is the cause of it. Pradhana is not, that's Advaita say. So, Ataha Pradhana Malla Nibarhana Nyayena Adivishati Etena Pradhana Karanavada Pratisheda Nyaya Kalapena Sarve Anvadi Karanavada Abhi Pradishidhataya Vyakhyada Veditavyaha Tesamavi Pradhanavada Shabdad Shabda Virodhitva Chaidi Vyakhyada Idi Padabhyasu Adhyaya Parisamaptim Dyotayati. This is the end of this particular Bhashya portion which I am reading, only for information. The reason is, Sankhya system of philosophy is taken as the representative of the entire enemy camp, Purvapakshins, instead of taking up the views of Vaisheshikas who believe anus, or atoms are Upadana Karanas, or the views of Mimamsakas or other schools of philosophy. Bhashyakara focuses on a system of philosophy which in many ways, which in very resembles the Vedantins, but at the same time different, totally different, because the great problem with the Sankhya system is, on the one hand they say Pradhanam Prakriti is the Jagat Karanam, at the same time the Pradhanam Prakriti is Jada. So this contradiction is brought in this particular sutra. Now I shall discuss a few things about different karya, karana, sambandha, bheda vadaha. That means this vada means approach. Schools of philosophy, school of thought, view, all this meaning can be karya, karana, sambandha, vada. Sambandha means bheda also. So one important point is, normally what we have to discuss is, I think before that, there is a well-known sloka, I think it is perhaps in the Samkshepa Shariraka. It's quoted in Vedanta Paribhasa. Many of these books repeatedly refer to this. Arambhavada Kanabhaksha Paksha Sanghadavadastu Bhadanta Paksha Sankhyadi Paksha Parinamavadu Vedanta Pakshastu Vivartavada. This is well known. So it gives a list of different approaches. So Nyaya and Vaisheshika, they are Arambhavadins. Actually, there are Asatkaryavadins. Gautama is Kanabhaksha Paksha, Vaisheshikas. Gautama and Nyaya Vaisheshika together are called Tarkikas. And Bauddhas are called Sanghada because they believe in Sanghadavada. I mean, the pada, the cloth is a Sanghada of different components put together. And Sankhyas believe in Parinamavada, which is one part of Satkaryavada, and Vedantins believe in Vivarta, which is the other component of Satkaryavada. Now we can discuss this perhaps, I think, in detail, So one is Satkaryavada. As I mentioned, Satkaryavada is the most important view to be properly understood whenever we study any Advaitic text. Just as I mentioned earlier, it has got two dimensions. One is Parinama, the other is Vivarta. Prakriti Parinamavada is the view of Sankhyas. Brahma Parinamavada is the view of the Ramanujays. The Ramanujays believe that the same Ishvara evolves into Chit, Achit. So Chit, Achit, Visishta. So Achit constitutes this universe. Chit are different jivas. So this Brahman or Saguna, Sakara, Savishesha, Sagala, Guna, Kalyana, Nidhi, Ishvara, Vasudeva, Narayana, whatever we may call, that Ishvara evolves, that is the Brahman of Ramanujays. That Ishvara evolves into both the universe, Jagat, which is Achit, and also Jivas, which is Chit. And that's why there is a connection, which is a bit a complex theory. It is called Apruthak Siddhi. There is similarity with Ishvara because Ishvara is Antaryami. At the same time, Jiva can never be the same as Ishvara. So that's a different subject. I have given about 23 subjects on Ramanuja system, Vedanta Desikas and Sudarshan Suri, that is Sudha Prakasi and all that. That you can see in YouTube, in Foundational Text of Indian Philosophy. It is meant for archives for the Stanford Students Association. That you can, I don't want to repeat those things now. So one is Satkaryavada. Satkaryavada is defined as Asat Akaranat Upadana Grahanat Sarva Sambhava Abhavas Shaktasya Sakhyakaranat Karana Bhavacha Satkaryam. In short, it only means that is Karya pre-exists in Karana. If Karya doesn't exist in Karana, it can never come out of it. If the oil did not pre-exist in oil seed, oil cannot come out of the oil seed. If the pada or cloth, vastra, cloth, it did not exist in tandu, the threads, then you cannot make a cloth from threads. If the golden rings and golden necklace did not pre-exist in gold, then you won't be able to make anything out of it. If ghata did not pre-exist in the mrit, then the ghata cannot come out of the mrit. So, in other words, or whatever the Advaitins say, Vivarta, the Sankhya will say, it is only Parinama. The reason is, Nama Rupa Vyavahariga dimension is not acceptable to non-Advaitins. So, in other words, in Parinamavada, both the Upadana Karana and the Karya have the same level of reality, same satta. Should explain. Suppose you have oil seeds and oil. Both belong to Vyavaharika satta. Suppose you have threads, tandu and cloth, both belong to Vyavaharika satta. At the same time, Rajju Sarpa. Rajju is Vyavaharika, Sarpa is only Pradibhasika. So, Vyavaharika and Pradibhasika, Rajju and Sarpa, they belong to two different levels of reality. The Sarpa doesn't exist in the room, only Rajju exists. Rajju is Vyavaharika, Sarpa is only Pradibhasika, conceptual reality. And the moment you recognize it is Rajju, then the Pradibhasika reality is cancelled. In its place, Vyavaharika reality is very well experienced. So when Pradibhasika is transcended, Vyavaharika is established. So in Vivartavada, both the Karya and Karana belong to two different levels of reality. That is, Sarpa is only Pradibhasika, Rajju is Vyavaharika. That's an important point, remember. Okay. Now, this is one thing. So I shall try to explain this little more if you are interested. So Parinamavada is already here. Nimbarka, Ramanuja, Sankhya, all these are Parinamavadins. That means Upadana Karanam and Karyam. Upadana Karanam means Samavai Karanam. In the context of cloth, the threads, Upadana Karanam. The woven cloth is Karyam. So they belong to the same reality. You can see the thread on one hand and you can also have cloth on the other hand. When thread becomes cloth, the cloth also becomes another Vyavaharika entity, just like thread. When you make an ornament from gold, the ornament also becomes a Vyavaharika reality like the gold. But when Rajju is mistaken to be Sarpa, the Sarpa doesn't have the same level of reality. Sarpa is only Pratibhasya and Rajju is Vyavaharika. So this important point in Parinama, both Upadana Karanam and Karyam were the same Satta. Mrit and Ghata. Mrit is Vyavaharika, Ghata is also Vyavaharika. Because the change is real. So they belong to the same level of Satta. But in Vivarta, it's different. They belong to the same, they do not belong to the same level of reality. In other words, when you realize that the Sarpa is not there, the Sarpa completely disappears from the room because it did not exist there. But at the moment that Sarpa Buddhi, which is only Pratibhasya, conceptual, based on some memory problem. It is not Asat, it is there in the zoo. Sarpa is in the zoo. But Sarpa is not in that room. What is there in the room? That is only rope. And that is Vyavaharika. Sarpa is only Pratibhasika. That's why Adattadaha Anyatha Pradha Vivarta. That means without any change, it appears to have become something else. Without any change, it appears to become something else. But in Parinama, really becomes something else. Ramanuja will say, Sankhyas will say, Mrit has become Ghata. Advaitin will say, Mrit appears to have become Ghata. Advaitin's argument is, Nama Rupa are superimposed on Upadana Karanam. So Upadana Karanam, Mrit appears to have become Ghata. Really it has not become Ghata. So then what about this Nama Rupa? Nama Rupa is coming and going. Vajaram Padam Vikaro Namanayam Mrittiga iteva Satyam. Mrittiga is Vyavaharika Satta. That is one thing. Now a little bit of Asatkaryavada, that's also important. So Asatkaryavada, they Nyaya Vaisheshika, they have very interesting theory. They would say that this effect is actually not an effect. In other words, in the way in which Advaitins or Sankhyas understand. For them, this Karyam is Asat before it came into existence. So they call Arambhavadins. Everything is a new creation. So Abhavadeva Bhavotpatti, etc. Na Anuvamurdya Pradubhavat. That means they say this Ghata comes into existence from the Ghata Bhava. That means the Ghata did not exist in birth. A cloth, you cannot say it existed in Tantu. You cannot say a golden necklace existed in gold, as Satkaryavadins say. That's why Abhavadeva Bhavotpatti. Na Anuvamurdya Pradubhavat. So this is a double negative you find here. Abhavadeva Bhavotpatti na Anuvamurdya Pradubhavat. Means Nayayikas and Vaisheshikas. They believe that Karyam is an entirely new entity. It did not pre-exist in Karanam. So in other words, they would say, when you make, let's say, when you make a Ghata from Mrit, that Mrit has ceased to be Mrit. It has completely gone out of existence. So Ghada comes into existence. That's the idea behind. Every karyam is a new entity. Every effect is a new creation. It's called Arambhavada. Another word is Arambhavada. Means before it became that, it did not exist. That's the idea. Just the opposite of Sakaryavadi. So I won't go further. Now we'll come to Bhashya proper. So please listen to the Bhashya now. Okay? This is important to understand because otherwise some of these, there are these Ikshadehana Shabdam Gaunasya Atma Shabda Tadnishtasya Mokshopadeshat Heyatva Avachanat Swapyayat Kridisamanyat and Sudatvacha. These are these 7 sutras constituting. Now we'll come to the Bhashya proper. You can take the book. Okay. See. That argument is again put forward. Yat uktam sattva dharmena jnanena sarvajnam pradhanam bhavishyadidi na upapadyate nahi pradhanavasthayam gunasamyat sattva dharmo jnanam sambhavati. So this idea behind. So here this argument is coming. Yattuktam sattva dharmena jnanena sarvajnam pradhanam bhavishyadidi. The Bhashyakara says, Advaitin say, Sattva dharma, through the increase of sattva guna, jnanam sarvajnyatam comes into existence. Again, you have to remember, the argument was already referred to earlier. Tatra niradishayam sarvajnyatva bijam sarvovesham abhi guru kalena anavachedad, etc. Actually, the idea is coming from yoga philosophy. So, when there is an increase of sattva dharma, then jnanam increases. As a result, pradhanam becomes sarvajna. I think we already discussed, so I won't discuss again, unless you ask. Tadna bhavati, it's not correct. Nahi pradhanavasthayam gunasamyat sattva-dharmo jnanam sambhavati. Why? Because in pradhanavastha here means Srishtehi Prag. That's when Sadeva Agre Yasi. Agre means before Srishti. So remember, Samyavastha is Pralayavastha. Before the creation Srishti begins. And also when the Srishti comes to an end, just before the next Srishti, then also Samyavastha is there. Where Sattva, Raja, Tamo Guna, all these 3 gunas are in Samya Avastha. At that time, the Sankhya will say, Jnanam exists, but then it's not possible. Why? The reason is given. Nanuktam sarvajnana shaktimatvena sarvajnam bhavishyadidi tatavi navopadyate. Tadvedin said that's not possible. Why? Idi gunasame sadi sattva vyapasayam jnana shakti masitya sarvajnam pradhanam uchyade. Yadi gunasame sadi sattva vyapasayam jnana shakti masitya sarvajnam pradhanam uchyade. So there is always this argument because the pradhana contains the potential for all knowledge. Therefore, the pradhana becomes sarvajna. This was the argument of Sankhyas. Bhashyakara say, tat navapadyate. No, it is not correct. Why? Because the problem is, yadi gunasami sadi satya vipasayam jnana shakti masiti sarvajnam pradhanam uchyade. Kamam rajastamo vipasayamapi jnana pribandha shakti masitya kinjit jnana uchyade. So, if Sattva-guna can produce sarvajnatvam, then what about Rajoguna and Tamoguna, which coexist with Sattva-guna in Samyavastha? If Sattva-guna can create jnanam or sarvajnatvam, then that sarvajnatvam can be compromised, can be reduced by the presence of Rajoguna and Tamoguna. Rajastamo vipasayamapi jnana pratibandha shakti masitya kinjit jnana uchyate or kinjityatam uchyate. This means jnana pratibandha shakti. What is jnana pratibandha shakti? Rajoguna and Tamoguna. Rajoguna and Tamoguna are, they call it jnana pratibandha. They are opposed to jnanam. Just as Sattva-guna produces jnanam, Rajoguna is opposed to jnana, is an obstacle to jnanam. So Rajoguna and Tamoguna will reduce sarvajñatvam. In that case, what happens? Kijjñatvam. Then your pradhana becomes alpajña. That means sarvajñatva is compromised. So this is a very important point. Apicha na sakshika sattvavrti jnanadina abhidiyate. Another point is, the Chaitanya Sakshi, Chaitanyam, there should be Chaitanya, a Purusha. Then only Sattvavrti becomes Jnanam. Sattvavrti becomes Jnanam when it is witnessed by Chaitanyam. That's why Apicha na sakshika, I mean without Chaitanyam or Purusha acting as Sakshi, witness Chaitanyam, without Chaitanyam. Sakshitvam here means Sanithyam. Sakshitvam means witness and also Sanithyam. Witnessing also Sanithyam, both are the same. So without the presence of Chaitanyam, the Sattvavrti of Jada Pradhana will not produce Jnanam. That's right. Because Jnanam comes from Purusha, even according to Sankhyas, Purusha is self-effulgent. So Chaitanyam or Jnanam come from Purusha, not Pradhana or Prakriti. So let's say, for example, when Chaitanya is like sunlight. When sunlight is near, sunlight is present, then only things are illumined, things are revealed. So, Tadaikshada, Saiksham Chakre, these are the Vedanta Vakyas which should be kept in mind. Ikshanam, Ikshanam means Darsanam, Jnanam, Tadaikshada, that is the source of this particular Sutra. The Sutra should be kept in mind, that is Ikshatihi na Shabdam, that's the meaning here. Tadaikshada, this is Vedanta Vakya. So, Ikshana Kriya means Jnanam. And this Jnanam is not possible without the presence of Chaitanya. When we say I know, what it means is Chaitanyam is manifesting in the sattvic aspect, sattva aspect of pradhanam. And that's how you can say I saw, or you can say saikshata, etc. So the moment Chaitanyam reveals the sattva prakriti, sattvic aspect of prakriti, jnanam comes. In other words, so then the problem arises, then what is the source of the jnanam? The source of jnanam is Chaitanyam, not prakriti, not pradhana. That's the idea behind. Sattvavrti jnanadina abhidiyate nacha acetanasya pradhanasya sakshitvam asti. Acetanasya pradhanasya sakshitvam. See, sakshitvam, sakshi bhava. For sakshi bhava, you need a sakshya. If you want somebody is a witness, somebody is present there, that person should be witness of something. If pradhanam itself becomes the sakshi and saksha both, then there cannot be any chaitanyam, because chaitanyam comes only from pradhana. Tasmat anubhavannam pradhanasya sarvajñatvam. Therefore, the argument that pradhanam, which is jada, becomes sarvajña, that argument is logically not tenable, because the jada pradhana has no sakshitvam. So your sakshitvam, that will come later. When Chaitanya as sakshi is present somewhere, then only something is revealed. When there is sunlight, the sunlight reveals things which are themselves devoid of effulgence. So the effulgence comes from Chaitanyam. Tasma Nuvannam Pradhanasya Sarvajnatam. Yoginam tu Chedanatvad Sattotkarsha Nimittam Sarvajnatam Upapannam iti Anudaharanam. So you have to remember there was an argument on the part of these, as I already referred to just now, that is Tatra Niradisayam Sarvajnata Bijam. That is a reference to yogis, Yoga Sutra. Yoga Sutra, first Samadhipada, 25th Sutra, it means. That means yogis. Yogis are enlightened Purushas. So when they have an abundance of Sattva-guna, the Sattva-guna produces Jnanam, Sattva Sanjayate Jnanam. Now Advaitins say, this Jnanam, it comes from Chaitanya and not from Jada itself. It is not coming from the Sattva-guna of Jada, but rather it is coming from Chaitana, Purusha. So Yoginam tu Chetanatvad. Yogis, Purushas, themselves are by their very nature Sachetanam, not like Pradhanam. Therefore, the Jnanam of yogis that they already referred to earlier, who get Sarvajnatam because of Sattotkarsha Nimittam, it's not a proper example. That means the Jnanam of yogis coming from Pradhanam. Sorry, not Pradhan, but Purusha. So therefore, this Udaharana, this example is not correct. It is the Anudaharanam. It means, other words, the Sarvajnatam of yogis is not coming from Pradhana, it is coming from Purusha. This idea. Sarvajnatam of yogis is not coming from Pradhanam, it is coming from Purusha. Purusha is Sachetanam, Pradhanam is always Achetanam. Now, again, the Sankhyas argue, Atha Punaha Sakshi Nimittam Ikshitrutam Pradhanasya Vikalpeda Yada Akti Nimittam Pindadehi Dagdhitum. So, Ayo Dehati, the statement found, Aya means a piece of iron. So, when a piece of iron gets red hot, then it transmits heat. If you touch it, your skin will be burned. So what's the source of that heat? The heat is not coming from the Ayapinda, the piece of iron. The heat is coming from the Agni. In other words, the Jnanam of yogis is like the heat of an Ayapinda. So you have to see these examples. The yogis get Jnanam. That Jnanam should be compared to the heat of Agni. That's an important thing. So it means that Jnanam of yogi is coming from Chaitanya. Just like the heat of a piece of iron, which is red hot iron, is coming from Agni and not from Ayapinda itself. The example is given by Bhashyakara. So of course here Bhashyakara will argue like this, but before that, before the Bhashyakara statement comes, Sankhyas are giving a possible objection. Just like they are giving their own comparison, which will be demolished by Advaitins. Sankhya will say, just like a piece of iron which is red hot, it heats, it burns your skin, like that the Sakshi Chaitanyam working in Pradhanam can cause the creation of this world, can be Jagat Karanam. Pradhanam itself is Achetanam, devoid of Chaitanyam, but at the same time Purusha is Sachetanam. So Purusha and Prakriti come together. That's how Srishti begins. So the Ikshada, the Veda mantra can be interpreted like this. Purusha is Sakshi Chaitanyam, and Pradhanam is like a piece of iron. So just like a piece of iron, when it is associated with Agni, can burn your skin, like that, the Achetanam Pradhanam, when associated with Sachetanam Purusha, can be the cause of Jagat Karanam. That is Sankhya argument. In answer to this, Bhashyakara will say, what is the real cause of the heat? Agni. In that case, the Agni is the cause of burning your skin and not the piece of iron. Is that clear to you? You can ask for clarification. That's why example is there. So Sankhyas are giving, I shall repeat once more. Sankhyas are telling you, well, Pradhanam is Achetanam. You have to remember the meaning of these words, because if you translate divide of conscience and all, it becomes unnecessarily complicated language. So Pradhanam is Achetanam. So Pradhanam cannot be Jagat Karanam. Advaita say. Sankhyas give a counter argument. They are giving an example. The example is this, just a piece of iron can burn your skin when that piece of iron becomes red hot. So in that red hot iron, what is causing your skin to burn? Not the piece of iron, but the fire, Agni present in the piece of iron. So in that case, who is burning? What is burning your finger? Not Dayapinda, but rather the Agni present in Dayapinda. Similarly, when Pradhanam, which is Achetanam, when it is in close proximity with Purusha, Chaitanyam, then what happens? That Pradhanam can create this world. Just like a red hot iron can burn your finger. It's electricity. Okay? Then the Advaita will say, all right, in that case, what's the real cause of burning the finger? The cause is Agni, not Ayapinda, not a piece of iron. So if you say, because of the Sakshitvam, because of the proximity of Purusha, Srishti begins, then you should say Purusha is responsible for Srishti. What is Purusha? Purusha is our Ishvara only. Sarvajna Sarvashaktiman Ishvara. Already stated in the Janmadeshetaka Shastra Yunitvad, etc. So in that case, you have to accept the fact that our Brahman, very Chaitanya, Sarvajnam, Sarvashaktiman, that is the cause, that is Jagat Karanam, not your Achetanam Pradhana. Is that clear? I hope it's clear. Because once you point out clear, you won't be this. Every argument is built upon the previous argument. So, unless you have at least the beginning, every argument is built upon the previous argument. So, otherwise you won't be able to follow. So, again I am reading. Atha punaha sakshi mittam ikshitrutva pradhanasyabi kalpeda. So, Sankhya says, sakshi nimittam. Sakshitvam can mean sannidhi matrena, sannidhyam, proximity, present, closely present nearby, in that sense. So you have to remember the Sankhya's concept of creation. In Samyavastha, there is no creation. But when Purusha comes into contact with Prakriti, creation begins. That's the idea behind. Okay. Yatha, example is given udaharana. Yada agni nimittam ayapinda dekhe degdhyatvam. So, a piece of iron, the ayo dehati, means piece of iron, it burns your finger. Agni nimittam. So, Agni is the real cause for degdhyatvam. Tatha sati yen nimittam ekshitrutvam. In that case, the real cause of ekshitruta means jnanam. Ekshitruta means jnanam. Tadaikshada. Saisham chakre. All should be understood as sankalpa, jnanam, etc. Yen nimittam ekshitrutam pradhanasya. If you say that because of Purusha's close proximity, pradhana is able to obtain jnanam, in that case, whose proximity made pradhana capable of achieving jnanam, that person is responsible for jnanam. Who is that? Purusha only. So the point is Sankhyas accept Purusha as Sarvajna, Sarvashaktiman, it's only Advaita only. That's why I gave the previous lessons. Sankhya system is dangerously close to Advaita, so that many people can really agree with their views. That's the idea behind. Tadeva sarvajnam mukhyam brahma jagata karanamidi yuktam. Na yat punaruktam brahmanobi na mukhyatvam sarvajnatvam uvodyade nityakriya nityajnana kriyatve jnana kriyam prati swatantrya asambhavaditi. So you have to remember this. This is a reference to another statement in the Bhashya. Normally, unless you memorize the Bhashya, you won't be able to remember. That's the point. But you have to, if you study more and more, you'll understand. That's why, there's a statement there previously, this Sankhya's view was given earlier. What is it? I shall mention it. So, yeah. Sankhya's sarvajnatvam is only as an upachara, non-mukhya. It is not mukhya, but again gauna, the statement was made here earlier. Okay, so yat praruktam brahmanobi mukhyam sarvajnatvam uvodyade nitya jnana kriyatve jnana kriyam prati swadandrya asambhavaditi. So there are two arguments in this context. One is jnanam, if you say brahmanaha jnanam is nitya, then what happens is Brahman is always experiencing and knowing things. Always. There is no time when Brahman is not seeing things, not understanding things, not knowing things. It is a perpetual process all the time. In that case, the point is that nahi sarvada sarva vishayam jnanam kurvadeva brahma vartate tathahi jnanasya nityatve jnana kriyambadi swadandram brahmano hiyeta. This is the original argument of the Sankhya's at the very beginning. What is the argument? The argument is this simple. Nahi sarvada sarva vishayam jnanam kurvadeva brahma vartate tathahi jnanasya nityatve jnana kriyambadi swadandram brahmano hiyeta. If you say Brahman has got nitya jnanam, that's Sankhya's arguing. If Brahman has got nitya jnanam, then what happens is Brahman is always sitting there knowing everything. In that case, tadaikshada, saisham chakre. How can you agree with that? Suppose you are always knowing something, then you cannot say, oh no, I knew it. Because knowledge is a perpetual thing. If jnanam is nitya for Brahman, then tadaikshada, then Brahman knew. Brahman has got the darshanam, the sankalpa. It cannot happen. Why? Because it indicates the beginning of jnanam. Remember. Oh no, I knew, suppose you say. It means you did not know earlier. If you are always in a state of perpetual jnanam, then you cannot say, no, I knew. Because you are always knowing. Therefore, tadaikshada saisham chakre, these Vedic statements will not be logical. That's the argument. Of course, this will be countered later. This is Sankhya's view. So that is one argument. So this should be understood properly. If Brahman has got nitya jnanam, which always knowing, jnanam kurvadeva. So remember that point is there, should be kept at that. The statement is nahi sarvada sarva vishayam jnanam kurvadeva brahma vartade. If Brahman is always sitting there, all the time knowing things, then saikshada, that statement will not tally, will not be agreeable. Because saikshada indicates, remember this is Sankhya's argument, not the Purvakshin argument. He said this is not Advaita's argument. So Purvakshin asking this question, saikshada will not work okay, tadaikshada will not work okay. if Brahman is always in a perpetual state of knowing things. Another argument is if Brahman always has got Nitya Jnanam, and Brahman is Nityam, Jnanam also is Nityam. So there will be two Nityas. There will be Advaita Hani. So Brahman's supremacy will be questioned by Brahman's Jnanam. Why? Brahman is Nitya and its Jnanam also is Nitya. So two Nityas will cancel each other. So Advaita Hani will happen. Just remember, these are the arguments of Sankhyas. So when the Advaitins come out, then everything will be demolished. Advaitin will say, Jnanam is Brahmana Swarupa. It's like sunlight. A sunlight is always there. You don't say, sun doesn't say, oh no, I'm seeing things. Wherever something appears within the vicinity of sunlight, that gets revealed. Because revealing prakasha and aushnya, heat, this constitutes the very swarupa of sunlight. Similarly, jnanam is swarupa, nitya jnana swarupa, Satchidananda Rupa, that is Atma Swarupa. That is the Advaitin's argument. But Sankhya's are giving a different twist to this argument. They say, so Brahman is Nityam, Brahman's Jnanam also is Nityam. So two Nityams, one Nitya will cancel the other Nitya. So that Advaita Hani will happen. I'm going to give the argument so that you'll be ready when the statement comes. I'm putting forward, moving forward. Advaitin say, it's not like that. Brahman and his Nityanam, both Nitya, no, that problem doesn't exist. You cannot say sun and his ability to reveal, they are not two different things. The Prakasha and Aushnya are considered very Swarupa of sun. So sun doesn't have to work hard to reveal anything. In his presence, everything gets revealed. So that's a counter argument. Of course, this comes a little later. So yet punaruktam brahmanovi mukhyam sarvajnyatam upadhyati nitya jnana kriyatve jnana kriyambadi swatantriya asambhavaditi atra uchide idam tavad bhavan prashtavyaha. Now, that means if Brahman, Sankhya says, Brahman is cannot be called sarvajna in mukhyartha, because always knowing things. Therefore, there is no freedom. In this context, Advaitins are putting a question to Sankhya. Now, the point is, what's the problem? If Brahman is always in a state of sarvajnatvam, what's the problem? Because Brahman can illumine everything. Idam tavad bhavan prashtavega katham nityajnana kriyate sarvajnatva hanihi iti. If Brahman's jnanam is nitya, then how does it affect the sarvajnatvam? Yasya hi sarva vishaya avabhasana kshamam jnanam nityamasti sa sarvajna iti vipradisiddham. So if somebody tells you something which is sarva vishaya avabhasana kshamam, that is sarvajnatvam. Brahman has got sarvajnatvam. What is sarvajnatvam? Sarva vishaya avabhasana kshamatvam, literal meaning. The ability to reveal everything, that is every object, that is the essence of sarvajnatvam. Jnanam nityam asti sa asarvajna iti nipradisiddham. If you say that Brahman, which is sarva vishaya avabhasana kshamam, which has got jnanam, which is sarva vishaya avabhasana kshamam, which has got knowledge, which can reveal everything, if that Brahman is asarvajna, if you call such a Brahman as asarvajna, then it is totally unacceptable. Anityate hi Jnanasya kadadit janati, kadadit na janati iti asarvajnatvam api syat. If you ever say that jnanam, that Brahman is, Brahma, the jnanam of Brahman is anitya, then what happens? Sometimes Brahman knows, sometimes it doesn't know. So in that case, kadadit janati, kadadit na janati. If nitya, then the argument is, Sankhya's argument is, Brahman is nitya, Brahman's jnanam also is nitya. One cancels the other. If anitya, these arguments come earlier, it came earlier. If anitya, then what happens is, Brahman sometimes knows, sometimes doesn't know. So you cannot say Brahman is nitya. But in that case, remember, this is a Purva-Pakshin argument. Purva-Pakshins are arguing. They argue, if Brahman is nitya, and the knowledge of Brahman, jnanam of Brahman is also nitya, then two nityas coming together will cancel each other. The Advaita Hani will come. If Brahman is anitya, if jnanam is anitya, then what happens? Sometimes kadadit janati, kadadit na janati. Sometimes Brahman knows, sometimes Brahman doesn't know. So atmakyatvam, asarvajnatvam will be problem. So against this, Advaitins will argue. Na so jnana nityate doshaka asti. Jnana nityate doshaka na asti. Jnana nityate jnana vishaya swadhantra vipadesho na upadhyati iti chedna. So if they argue like this, it is called Sutta Pramanavadam, it is called. If jnanam is nitya, then Brahman has to keep knowing all the things. On the other hand, Brahman is anitya, then kinjikyatam jnanatam asarvajnyatam will come. Now, against this, an argument is given here. For example, that argument is well known. Pradaushne prakashe api savitari dekhati prakashayati iti swadhantriya vipadesha darshanat. Vipadesh means normally there is a vyavahara bhasha, it is already there. See, for example, heat and light, which constitute the swarupa of sun. And this act is going on all the time. So whenever sun is there, its swarupa, that is prakasha and aushnya, will also be there. Like that, whenever there is Brahman, and the jnanam also is the essential inherent nature swarupa of Brahman. Just like aushnya and prakasha constitute the inherent nature of Surya, Savita, sun. Like that, jnanam also constitute the essential nature of Brahman. It is not that Brahman has got something like a nitya jnanam. These are not two different things. We cannot think of sun without the swarupa guna of sun, that is prakasha and aushnya. Like that, jnanam is the swarupa, nitya jnana swarupa of Advaitins. This is the argument. Now, when this argument is put forward, Sankhyas will say, Nanu savituhu dahya prakashya samyogi sati dekhati prakashayati iti vyapadesha syat. So they say, Nanu savituhu dahya prakashya samyoga. So for sun to burn something, it needs something that could be burned. Something you place in sunlight, it get burned. It can get burned. Something you keep in sunlight, it gets revealed. So there is always a need for dahya prakasha samyoga. Savituhu dahya prakasha samyoga. Dahya means something to be burned. Prakasha means something to be revealed, something to be illumined. When sunlight and something to be illumined, some yoga comes, then it is revealed. When sunlight, something to be burned, they come together, some yoga, then it gets burned. Now, that is the only way that sun can cause burning and mean that dahana kriya and prakasha. That their argument. Iti nit natu brahmanaka pragutpattehi jnana karma samyogo astidi vishamo drishtantaka. This example drishtanta has got a vaishamyam, durghadatvam. What is durghadatvam? You get the example of sun. Sun needs something to illumine in front of it. Then only it can reveal. It needs something that is dahya. Then only it can do dahana kriya. Some yoga is needed. But we are talking about srishtehe prag, means before creation. Before creation there was nothing. Pragutpattehe jnana karma samyogu nasti vishamo drishtantaka. So you remember that na should be, anvaya should be done. Natu brahmanaka pragutpattehe jnana karma samyogu asti idi vishamo drishtantaka. Because Brahman is ekameva advitiyam. Before Srishti, Saikshada you say. So how can Brahman reveal anything before Srishti? Pragutpattehi. How can you bring this argument of sunlight and its ability to reveal and to burn to establish the Nitya Jnana Suruvattam of Brahman? So the example doesn't work. That's the idea. That's Vishamo Drishtanta. That means Udaharanasya Daurghadatyam Vaishamyam. That's the idea behind. Asatyabi karmani savida prakashide iti kartavyatva darshana. Normally you find, even if there is no object, still we say, normally we say, savida prakashate. You say the word, savida prakashate. Iti kartrutva vyapadesa darshana. Normally you find, the vyavahara, prayoga you find, sun shines, sun reveals. You often find, without bringing a karagatva, without bringing a karma. It's not like I am going there, you are coming there, not that kind of karma. Sun shines, savida prakashate, all this example. Here, kartrutva vibhadesha darshana, we normally imply, there is an implication of kartrutvam, of sun. Sun, so that is savituhu, kartrutvam is implied here when you use the word savida prakashate, etc. Sun is not doing anything because that is a natural surupa of sun, to be shining. That's the idea behind. So what does, remember, you have to remember the argument Sankhyas are giving that the sun example, it will not work here. Because tadaikshada, that Upanishad Vakya is related to Srishtehe prag, Srishte agre. So they were Saumya agre asid, the Chandogya Upanishad. Agre means before creation, before anything came into existence. At that time there was nothing. So, but you are giving the example of sunlight. The sunlight needs something, an object to burn, and also an object to reveal, to illumine, savida prakashade, etc. So, even though sun is not doing anything like a karma, the kartrutvam is implied very clearly in the normal usage, without any object. Savida prakashade, there is no real karma here as such. There is nothing that sun is revealing in the particular context. But still we say sun shines, we say. So here also, before Srishti also, tadaikshata, that jnanam can be an automatic process. Kartrutvam can be implied without the necessity of an object. There is no need of an object to imply kartrutvam of Brahman in the particular mantra, tadaikshata. That's the idea behind. Asatyabi karmani, without a karma, savida pragashati iti kartrutva vyapatesha darshanat. In the absence of any object, you can still see, we say the sun shines, we can say. Evam asatya abhignana karmani brahmanaha tadaikshada iti kartavyatva vyapatesha upatehi na vaishamyam. Therefore, there is no problem with this example. The example of sunlight can be considered to be appropriate in this context. You can have any doubt, you can ask. So this continues.
So in this example, in this examples, I think the Tatastha Lakshana is being hinted at. That Jnanam is just it is Tatastha Lakshana of Brahman that is being explained. Is that
Tatastha Lakshana? No. Tatastha Lakshana, remember, here in this context, the word Brahman sometimes can be used as Saguna Sakara Brahman. Tatastha Lakshana Janmadeshyadaha, that is the context. So don't mistake. Here, this particular section, whenever we talk about Brahman here, not everywhere, but most of the context, the implication is Ishvara. Because Srishti is mentioned here, Jagat Karanam is mentioned here. Jagat Karanam, of course, in Tatastha Lakshanam, Janmadesya, that is also is Ishvara is implied here. But in this particular context, whether Jagat Karanam is the Achetana Pradhanam or Sachetana Purusha. In fact, the Sachetana Purusha of Sankhyas also can be interpreted as Saguna Sakara Ishvara with a little change. As I mentioned, Pradhanam can Achetana Pradhanam of Sankhya's is perfectly understandable and logical. Only point is that Pradhanam Prakriti becomes an instrument in the hands of Sachetana Purusha. Then that Sachetana Purusha becomes Advaita Ishvara, Sarvajna, Sarvashaktiman, etc. The problem is Sankhyas are arguing, on the one hand they are arguing this Pradhanam is Achetana. They also argue this Pradhanam is Sarvajna and Sarvashaktiman. Pradhanam is Sarvajna because in the Samyavastha that Prakriti Pradhanam contains Sattva-guna. And the Sattva-guna is the source of Jnana. And when you increase Sattva-guna, what happens? You become Sarvajna. Advaita's argument is from the Sattva-guna itself you cannot become Sarvajna. To become Sarvajna you need the Sannidhyam of Chaitanyam. Something can be revealed only when it is kept in the close proximity of something which has got light. In other words, Achetanam Jada is only an imagination. See, Purusha is Sachetana, Prakriti is Achetana. And they say that when Purusha and Prakriti come together, Srishti begins. Actually, when light and darkness coming together, that is totally nonsensical. Every Achetana object, Achetana, that's why I want to get, Achetana object means not conscience, Prakriti. It becomes revealed only when it comes within the close proximity of Sachetana, Purusha. And when it comes within the close proximity of Sachetana Purusha, then it is no more achetana. It gets chaitanyam. Just like a piece of iron, when it's red hot, it gets associated with heat. So what is the heat that you find in a red hot iron piece? That heat belongs to Agni. So to say that, in other words, to say that Achetana Prakriti is the source of everything is like saying the piece of iron burnt you. The piece of iron cannot burn you. It is only the heat that is present in the piece of iron that can burn you. Follow that. Similarly, the Chaitanyam which is active in Prakriti can be the cause of creation. Then what is the cause of creation? Chaitanyam only. And if Purusha becomes the cause of creation, that Purusha is our Sarvajna Ishvara only. That's the point. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
I have a question also.
Yeah.
Maharaj, in Satkaryavada, cloth is previously pre-existing in the thread.
Yeah.
And that is, Karyam is always there in the Upadana Karana.
Yeah.
Then what is the place of the Nimitta Karana? Because without the Nimitta Karana, this Upadana Karana cannot become the Karya.
Yeah. And Nimitta Karana produces Vyavaharika Buddhi. See, when a weaver uses his instrument and Sahagari Karana, all other auxiliary causes, the pot maker uses his instruments, what happens? Upadana Karana is given Nama and Rupa by the Nimitta Karana, the pot maker. And Nama Rupa brings in a new element of Vyavahara Buddhi on Mrit. So you cannot store water in a piece, on a heap of clay. But that heap of clay becomes a pot in which you can store water, and that's because of Nimitta Karana and Sahagari Karana, all other auxiliary causes. So the Vyavahara Buddhi, Nama through Vyavahara Buddhi, is the creation of Nimitta Karana. Okay? That's it.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll conclude now. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.